I just want to give my final introduction for today before is to Eoin Warner, award-winning presenter and producer with RTE. In case you're wondering, that's not me tweeting, it's just sounds behind. So I'm told that he's going to be doing a very dynamic and engaging talk, hence the furniture has to be removed. And to really start off with, to show you that Eoin is going to celebrate, captivating the storytelling that celebrates Ireland's natural history and natural heritage. And I think it's going to be a nice way for us to finish off our day. And post Eoin then, Mary is going to join us just for a wrap-up for the day's proceedings. So with that, I'll hand over to Eoin.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. All of what you just saw there was filmed here in Ireland. And for a lot of us, when we think of wildlife documentaries or even wildlife in general, we often think of exotic, far-flung places like Africa or Antarctica. But as you can see there, Ireland's wildlife is just as beautiful, just as wondrous as anything you'll see in the whole world. And that's why I suppose I'm involved in the work that I do, is because I want to spread that message. I want to make people aware about how beautiful our wildlife is, how rich and diverse our more than human world is. And as well as that, I suppose I really want to try and get people to get outside more, to engage with nature more, to enjoy nature, to be proud of what we have, and to hopefully fall in love with it because we protect what we love. The name of this presentation is Discovering Ireland's Natural World, and I would love nothing more than to take the whole 450 of you out the door and go for a nice nature walk. But I don't think Michael would be too keen on me taking you away for the afternoon. So my challenge is to try and bring nature into the Aviva. And so as part of that, I would like to read you a short story, and I'd love for you just to close your eyes while I read it and try and connect to this virtual nature walk. And at the end of the story, there's going to be about 30 seconds of audio that we recorded in a field in the west of Ireland last year, and I'd love you just to keep your eyes closed and just try and make that connection for that little while. So, if you can close your eyes for a moment and see what I am seeing. A small boy leaving the back door of his house, closing it quietly as everyone is still asleep inside. It is early morning in the month of May. He climbs up the steps of the back garden and reaches a wire fence. A fence that separates the garden from the fields and the hidden valley beyond. This fence is the border. This is the line between the familiar and the unfamiliar. The threshold between the tamed and the wild, our world and the other world. Clambering over the wire fence, he lands in long grass, still damp and glistening from the morning dew. He leaves a trail as he walks through the field to the far ditch, where there's a gap in the hedge, another chasm going deeper into this wild world. There are cows in the field too. They part and turn to study the small boy. Heavy sniffs, smelling the early morning trespasser. The boy stops and studies every detail and movement of the cows, how they turn their heads in curving sweeps to lick their backs. He reaches out to touch the face of the closest one, but she turns away in disinterest. Pushing through the gap, he walks the small rocky Bohereen down towards the valley. White thorn bushes in full bloom tower above, heavy with the scent of summer. Blackbirds call in alarm. Idle for years, the Bohereen is choked with briars and yellow-flecked furze. The boy picks his way through the thorny gaps to find his favourite place to sit, snuggled by a hedge on the edge of the stream field. And here he waits. He patiently waits for nature to absorb him, to become part of the hedge. The morning breeze whispers music through the dancing leaves above him, and slowly nature begins to reveal herself. The smallest volunteers first. A spider continues spinning a web in the long grass by his feet. A hare moves out of its form to feed on the tops of sweet new grass. Birds begin to flick in the branches overhead. Nature's song returns. The boy is alone, but not lonely. Filled with the beauty and wonder of other beings, he is home. I'm glad you're still in the room. I wasn't too sure if I'd open my eyes and you'd all be gone. There's no surprises or prizes as to who the small boy in that story was. I was very lucky to have grown up in West Cork in the 1970s and 80s. That's me on the right, not on the left, in case you're wondering. And we were, back then, we were pretty feral. We were kind of wild. Every morning our parents would just release us, and we'd go off exploring through the fields, through the streams, through the woods, climbing trees, falling out of trees. And it was a very special time because we were learning about nature by ourselves. We were seeing the wonder of nature through the eyes of a child. And there was no adults there telling us what the different things were. And it's there that I got that spark of the natural world, and where I learned things like being patient and observation and so on. But the biggest thing, I suppose, at that time was that there was no technology there that was trying to grab our attention. And that has completely changed in the last generation. And I learned something recently that was saddened to me, but I already knew in my heart, and that's this idea of the extinction of nature experiences for children. And there's a study in the UK, which is very much mirrored in the Irish society, that the roaming range, and that's the range where children are allowed to play unsupervised by adults, has reduced by 90% in the last 40 years. So those opportunities for connection aren't there as they were. And these years, these are the formative years for us when we're children. When you start to build your worldview, when you start to get to know what's valuable in life, you start to make relationships within your species and with the species all around you. And we don't know yet what the impact of this nature deficit will be, but I would hazard a guess that it's only going to accelerate the divergent paths that we're on as humans from the natural world. And that's why it is so, so important for us to bring our children into nature. And I'd implore any of you today, whatever you take from this talk, that your 1 year's resolution is, if you've got children, grandchildren, or nephews or nieces, is to bring them out into the natural world and let them explore for themselves. And you know, the natural world sounds very highfalutin, but like bring them to a park, to a wood, to the seashore, and just let them play. The last documentary that I was involved in, and what the clips I'm going to show you from, is from this documentary, Ireland's Wild Islands. And it was a journey that I took from Rathlin Island up in the northeast, all along our coastline, along the west coast, down to County Cork to Fastnet. And we were looking at the amazing wildlife that makes this challenging environment its home. But one of the main reasons that we chose our islands is because that's one of the last places where our nature is still clinging on. And that is because over the last few decades, we have been pushing nature out to make room for us. We've been pushing nature out of our towns, our cities, pushing nature out of our farms. We've been draining bogs and cutting down trees and pushing it to the very edges, to the liminal areas. And that's how I suppose I see a lot of Ireland's nature now, is that there's islands of populations or islands of habitat. And so the whole idea of islands being remote, isolated, and surrounded by an inhospitable environment, that's very much a metaphor for what nature is like in Ireland at the moment. And when I think of these islands, I think of nature, islands of woodlands, or of the sea and marine life, or of boglands. And today I'd like to just focus on two of them and just delve a little bit deeper and show you some of the amazing animals that make these places their home. Also to talk a little bit about some of the challenges they're facing, but I also want to speak about some of the hope stories there, because I think hope is something that's very much needed in today's age when it comes to the environment and some of the challenges that we are facing. So woodlands. So Ireland and the trees, we have a very kind of a complicated relationship and history with trees in this country. When the first hunter-gatherers came here about 12,000 years ago, it was a completely wooded island. It's estimated that there was 80% of the island was covered in trees. And the people who lived that time, and even to this day, they associated themselves through those trees. So the word that they call themselves, the Gael, the Irish, that is its early origin is, the meaning in early Irish is forest dwellers. So they saw themselves in association with trees, and even the modern day words of Gaelic and Gaeilge are all part of that same root word. And when you think of Gaeilge and the Irish language, so much of the way that we interacted with the world back then, so much of the interactions and the values we had with the natural world are encoded and captured within the language. And there's people like Monchan McGann who's doing great work in publishing books that's making all this information very accessible. But also beyond that, there were special laws that we had specifically to protect trees within the Brehon laws of Ireland. And they were a very evolved civil law that was used until the end of the 16th century. And in that, trees you were penalised, or there was penalties attached if you damaged a tree or cut down a tree. And depending on what the tree was, it varied in the actual penalty that was there. But not only that, the esteem that we held trees in, it actually influenced our early alphabet, the Ogham alphabet. Each one of the letters was associated with a tree, and the name of the tree kind of it showed the sound of that letter. So, for example, the letter D is for Dard, which is an oak tree. The letter F is Farnog, which is an alder tree. And all of that is encapsulated within our Luganamnacha, which is our place names, and Dinshanachas, the place name lore. So it allows us to reimagine the landscape more than what it is today. So if you're ever down in Adair, travelling through it, or more than likely stuck in traffic in Adair in County Limerick, you can reimagine what it looked like as an oak forest that forded the River Meigh, Dara. If you're in Clonskea, Clunskiach, it's the meadow of the whitethorn trees. Or if you're in Terranure, not too far from here, it's the land of the yew trees. So the whole language just gives us another way to interpret the landscape. So it was 80% tree cover when people first came here. In 1922, we had 1% left. And what's even sadder than that is that 100 years later, we still only have 1% of our original forest left. And that, I think, is a very sad story when you think of a nation that identified itself through trees, that we only have that small percentage left, and even that isn't in very good health. We do have 15% of these monoculture plantations of non-native trees all over the country, but they offer very little in terms of habitat for nature and biodiversity. Now, when you put that in comparison to a native forest, which is one of our most richest and diverse habitats, like a mature oak tree like this, can support over 280 different species of insect, over 300 different species of lichen, innumerable species of birds, mammals, and fungi. This particular tree is called the Brian Brew oak tree. It's found down in Toomgraney in County Clare. And it was part of the great oak forest of Slieve-Aughty, which went from East Clare all the way to South Galway, and it's one of the last remnants of it. But it's estimated to be over 1,000 years old. And they're just very special places. So it's not all bad news. There is, I believe, a sea change happening in our woodlands. And it's everything from how our government is creating initiatives for landowners to plant more trees, and then for the building of awareness amongst the public about the value of our trees and our tree heritage. I don't know if many of you have read the book, The Irish Atlantic Rainforest, from Owen Dalton. It is an absolutely captivating read, and you will never look at the landscape in the same way again. There are also amazing organisations like Home Tree in County Clare, who are buying up tracts of land, rewilding it, replanting it with native trees. They have their first organic tree nursery in Ireland. And there you can go down and you can volunteer for a day and plant trees and feel that you're being part of the solution. They're doing really amazing work. So I'm going to show you two clips that are associated with these islands of woodland. And the first clip we filmed in Achill Island in May 2020, bit of a strange time. And when it comes to filming wildlife in this country, you've heard the old adage, never work with children or never work with animals. Well, try working with wild animals in our unpredictable climate. It is very, very challenging. And so you probably saw at the very start, we showed some footage of 2 red deer stags fighting in Lough Lane in Killarney. And that footage took 9 weeks over 3 years to capture that particular piece. So it's a huge amount of commitment in terms of the camera people hours and everything else. But then there are times when it all works out on the day. And this particular day, the piece I'm going to show you now, we filmed in one day. We came across this female stoat, and she was returning to her den every 20 minutes with a new kill. And it was perfect dappled sunlight. And we had a camera, it's called a phantom camera. And it can record 76,000 frames per second. So it can slow something that's so fleeting so that you can see the nuances of movement and the real beauty of these animals. The only challenge we actually had that day was that I had COVID hair, and I couldn't get a cut anywhere. So I looked like Bobby Ewing from Dallas from the 1980s. And then the second piece I'm going to show you directly after that was filmed on Clare Island. And I'm not too sure if many of you have been out there, but Clare Island is pretty much a windswept, treeless island. And this is like an island within an island. And it's a valley of mature oak wood that's been there for centuries. And how it survived, I don't know. But as soon as you enter it from the treeless landscape, it suddenly feels right. It feels healthy. So we'll play those for you now.
A wild Irish stoat like this has to use every tool in its toolbox. They've somehow adapted to use all the skills that a hunter must have. They can climb trees to steal eggs and nestlings. They can swim. The only thing they can't really do is fly, and even at that, they can jump huge distances. And it's all the more poignant when you think how little woodland like this we have left, that these little pockets where these animals have been marginalized over centuries are so important. These guys have been pushed to the very extremes to survive, and these are the survivors. They just need a little help from us, and they'll do the rest themselves. That lovely smell of fresh new growth. Everything from the mainland, from celandines, bluebells, and wood sorrel. And you wouldn't expect to have such a diversity of flora on an island. And all these are indicators of an ancient woodland. No one knows the full story of this mysterious little forest. Most of these places, nearly all of them, are gone. And yes, we need to farm, yes, we need to produce food. But we can do it in a better way. We don't need to use all the land. We need to leave places like this for nature. This is a really, really special place, and it's a place that has to be preserved, because these woodland habitats bring a whole range of different species and richness to the biodiversity of these islands that so many of the islands are now missing.
This is a picture of me off the West Cork coast with a blue shark. I'm doing some free diving. And as a child, I used to love watching Jacques Cousteau diving in these turquoise waters with stunning marine life off some French Polynesian island. And I never imagined that we had marine life like this off our coast. And I certainly did not imagine that I'd be swimming with them like that. And the thing about free diving is that when you're free diving in comparison to scuba diving, you're released from all that gear in your back. So you're much more freer, so it almost feels like flying when you're in there. And as well, you're not making any noise, you're not making any bubbles, and so you're a lot more approachable by nature because you're just part of the element that's there. And particularly for an apex predator like a blue shark who has no fear, they'll come right up to your face, really, really close, and they have these electrosensors in their nose, and it's almost as if they're reading you, and then they'll just turn away at the last second. And it's the most invigorating and exciting experience that you'll ever have. And I suppose I wanted to show you this just to show that we are an island nation, and we have this amazing stuff on our doorstep. And 40% of us live within 5 kilometers of the coast. Most of our towns and cities are on the coast, and even though that's the case, many of us spend our daily lives with our backs to the sea, not considering its health or the amazing wonders that lie beneath. And I would encourage everyone to turn around and face it, because the ocean's health is inextricably linked with our health. I'm not too sure if you're aware, but half of the oxygen that we breathe doesn't come from trees, but comes from tiny phytoplankton that photosynthesizes in the ocean. The water that we drink evaporates from the sea surface and falls as rain, and so much of the food that we eat and the protein that we eat comes from the sea. And so how is the health of our oceans at the moment? Well, it has got its challenges in terms of overfishing, pollution, acidification, sea temperature rising. But here in Ireland, we have a really special opportunity. You can see from this map that 7 times the size of our land area is our sea territory. So we have a huge opportunity to increase the amount of marine protection zones that we have. And that's why I wanted to introduce you to these guys. I'm not too sure if you're aware of Fair Seas. They're a coalition of the various environmental NGOs in Ireland, and they are looking to campaign internationally for Ireland to be a global leader in terms of marine protection areas. So at the moment, we have 9% of our sea is a marine protected area, and they're looking to increase that to 30%, so by 2030. So that's the 30 by 30 campaign. And the idea of having 30% of that huge amount of marine area preserved for nature and marine life would be just an amazing asset to us as a country and to our coastal communities. And conservation measures work. And this species is a case in point, the basking shark. The picture on the left-hand side was taken in Clare Island in the 1950s, where it had the largest basking shark fishery in the whole world. Over 10,000 of these gentle giants were slaughtered over those 3 decades, the 50s, 60s and 70s, for the oil in their liver. And it's only last year that the Irish government has passed legislation now that they're fully protected in our waters. And that's because of pressure from the public, a change in the attitudes towards conservation, and obviously the NGOs that do it. But that has a huge impact, and only for that change in mindset, the next clip I'm going to show you would never have happened. And we filmed it in September 2021. We spent 3 days in the water with the basking sharks, and I'll just let the footage tell you the story. Basking sharks cruise the west coast of Ireland in spring and summer. They usually appear in ones and twos with their mouths wide open, feeding on plankton. But in the last 7 years, something extraordinary has been discovered. This. A huge gathering of basking sharks, only ever seen a handful of times before. Dozens and dozens of these gentle giants gathering for a few days in late summer off the coast of Clare. This is the only place on Earth where this is being seen. The sharks appearing in such large numbers, forming beautiful concentric circles. Another tough day at the office. I believe that there's the beginning of a sea change. 5 years ago, someone like me wouldn't be invited to address a national conference like this. I believe that there's a hunger and a desire for change and for connection, and a realization that we cannot keep extracting and consuming the way we are without considering the other species that we share this planet with. There's also an increased understanding that every species on this planet is interconnected and interdependent, from the smallest microscopic fungi to the most majestic and huge whales. And each one of those animals and species is keeping the other in balance. And every one of those species has an equal right to life on this planet as we have. We are one species amongst millions. What we need to do, we need to give space for nature. We need to give places for nature to be. And ironically, nature doesn't need protection by us, it needs protection from us and our insatiable way of consuming resources and space. I want to leave you with just a quote from Wendell Berry. People exploit what they merely conclude to be of value, but they defend what they love. So I hope today, after this talk, that you will find a little bit more inspired about Ireland's nature, that you might have fallen even a little bit more in love with it, and that you will work to protect it. But moreover, I hope that you spend more time in nature with your children, reconnecting. And especially, I hope that you will consider the natural world in all the decisions that you make, when you're eating, living, working, traveling. Gurmila Mahagav.